Hello, my random viewers, and welcome to Randomly Offensive. Today, we are going to be continuing our story of King from the Tekken franchise. Now, starting our story off is with King the Second, because King the First was tragically murdered by Ogre, with this king being one of the orphans that got to watch that tragedy take place before his very eyes. And he now has decided to don the Jaguar mask and has taken the name of King the Second. However, for the duration of this video, we will only refer to him as King. Now, he doesn't just want to take over the title of King, but he also wants to keep everything that King stood for, which was pride, honor, and above all, taking care of those who are incapable of taking care of themselves. And so this new king decides to start working at the orphanage that he resides at and climbing the ranks to eventually become the head of the orphanage and be the same father figure that King the First was, because King the First not only was the founder of this orphanage, but was one of the only men that would consistently come and visit these orphans, was the only person to come and bring them gifts every Christmas and every Thanksgiving, and this young man just had to watch that figure be brutally murdered. Now, with that being said, Armored King, King's arch rival, or former arch rival, has, of course, heard about this on the news and has decided to come and adopt King. And with that adoption, he is adopting King to train him in the ways of his predecessor. And so with the adoption underway, King now has someone to call father. However, Armored King will never take that title. He is master. And King quickly learns that Armored King training style is nowhere near the kindness and patience of King the First. King is now having to realize that he is being thrown in survival situations in the middle of nowhere for weeks on end, having to survive on nothing but his own wit and what the land has to provide. Armor King also does not hold back his punches during their sparring sessions, beating the crap out of this young man. And this goes on for 4 years. Now, you'd think that King would grow a hatred for Armored King, but that's not the case. Armored King grows a bond with King, and they become very close. And now, even though he lost his first father figure, King now has a father figure and has someone to call dad. Though it is always in the form of calling him master, that is close enough for King the Second. So, the day finally comes to where the third King of the Iron Fist tournament is announced, and King decides to draw and try to get in hopes that the ogre, who he calls the god of fighting, will also be a competitor. And so he signs, and he waits and waits and waits for days for the acceptance letter. Armored King finally sees a letter for King the Second and hands it to him. King holds his breath as he opens it, hoping that this will be his chance to redeem his mentor. And as he opens it, he is denied acceptance for the King of the Iron Fist Tournament 3. So, with Tekken 3 on its way, the King of the Iron Fist tournament starts, and King decides to go there anyway, just not as a competitor. And so he goes to the King of the Iron Fist tournament and watches in awe at the incredible strength and might that all these fighters have brought to the table. However, he has been training his whole life under the original King the First, and now he's been going through brutal training under Armored King for the past 4 years, so he's confident that he could have taken out all of these people. The guy is ripped. He is as fit as you can be, incredibly well trained, and he's honestly at a whole new level than King the First, when King the First was in his prime. He scouts the roster and looks at all the fighters in hopes that he will see the ogre. However, the ogre is nowhere to be seen. Will he never get a chance to avenge the death of King the First? And if he does, how long must he wait and how long must he train? So, as he's watching all of these fighters, round after round after round, the tournament slowly coming to an end, and Jin Kazuma ends up becoming the victor and gets to move on to the championship round, which is held in a tournament just east of the original fighting ring. And King sits in the empty area of where all the fighters once were and where the audience once was, and he looks up at the temple and sees a green figure walking towards the doorway, and so quickly he hops up and runs as fast as he can to the temple. As he approaches the green figure, it's coming more and more clear, and he's able to identify that this is King the First murderer. This is Ogre, and he finally approaches Ogre and he looks at him and gets in between him and the doorway, just like King the First did all those years ago between the Ogre and the orphanage. The Ogre looks at him and recognizes his presence, knowing that Ogre, all those years ago, was going after this orphan, this man with such a powerful soul and such a strong will to survive. And Ogre gets a smile on his face, for he has a chance once again to consume that soul. "This day will be your last day," says King, as he knows he's about to avenge the death of King the First. He is about to take revenge upon the murderer of his father figure, and with that, the fight between Ogre and King begins, and this is one of the most intense fights that King will ever experience, and this fight becomes super extreme, super fast. And immediately, King just tackles Ogre to the ground and starts delivering the Melon Smasher, where he just clasps both hands together and starts pounding down on Ogre like an insane ape. And King just goes ape shit on Ogre, just bashing this guy's face in and just smashing his fists into the face of Ogre, into the chest of Ogre, into anything that King can hit. That is exactly what he hits. He's not even aiming at this point. He's just gone in complete insane and blinded by vengeance. And Ogre is delivering punches the best he can to get King off of him, but it's not working. So Ogre reaches down to the ground with each hand on each side of him and digs his fingers into the cement, pulling cement gravel out of the ground, and then just bringing his hands together and smashing the cement on each side of King's face, and just clapping the cement with King's face in between, creating a King cement sandwich. And then he manages to thrust King off of him. And as Ogre gets up, he realizes that he is bleeding, and this brings a smile to Ogre's face once again. What an honor. What an amazing opponent to get to consume. And so the Ogre charges in, throwing epic, massive kicks that are causing shockwaves throughout the temple, and causing punches that are throwing punches that are causing equal amount of shockwaves. But the King is managing to block them with open palm blocks and rope-a-doping his way around every attack, delivering massive, equally massive blows to Ogre. And the Ogre is getting rocked and shaked by this exchange. Now, King, he's getting injured, but he's not feeling anything. He is in a rage. He is blinded by his rage, and he manages to just force his hands through solid cement and pull up this massive block of cement, and he smashes it over the head of the ogre, and then delivering a low roundhouse kick directly to the temple of ogre. And ogre gets rocked to the right a little bit and then just comes back with a left hook at the exact same time that King delivers a thrusting elbow, and the thrusting elbow connects right in the middle of ogre's face, snapping his nose, with the left hook of ogre connecting to the right rib cage of King, snapping every single rib on his right side. Again, he does not feel a thing. He's in rage. And so King just grabs the back of ogre's skull and just starts smashing ogre's face against his knee repeatedly over and over and over. And as ogre loses strength in his legs, King picks that son of a bitch up by the back of his head and starts delivering elbows over and over and over and over into ogre's face, and then just starts punching, uppercutting into the rib cages and stomach of ogre. King is giving this guy a massive onslaught, and if you have ever played as King in the Tekken franchise, you know that King is a defensive player, not an offensive player. You have to master the defensive style gameplay when playing as King, but you'll also know that if you manage to get a flow in offensive attack, there is no stopping this son of a bitch, and that doesn't change just because we're no longer in the gameplay. That is his character, and it follows through in the mangas, in the animes, in the cutscenes. It follows through in everything, and so ogre is not going to be able to stop this massive onslaught that King is putting out. King then performs the grapple chain that he is incredibly famous for, and it first debuted in Tekken 3. And as he's doing the grapple chain, he is slowly snapping the bones of ogre, and ogre for the first time wisping in pain. The first bone to snap is the left forearm of ogre. The second 3 bones to snap are the ribs, and then a hip bone manages to get dislocated, his shoulder getting fractured, and his legs slowly starting to snap as King delivers the grapple chain that he's known for. And ogre is repeatedly getting slammed into the ground and picked back up, and just going from one grapple to another. And the punishment that ogre is receiving is unlike any punishment he has ever received before. King finally picks up ogre above his head and slams him down on the ground as his final attack. And King is now tired. He's fighting for breath. He just put so much energy into this onslaught of attacks. But then he's horrified because the ogre stands up and is ready for more. And even though he has broken bones all over his body, even though he just took massive amounts of punishment, he doesn't seem fazed. The ogre then very quickly just grabs the throat of King and picks King up off the ground, and King is kicking and being choked incredibly fast, and the pressure on King's throat is incredible for one hand, especially of a hand that is on a guy who has broken bones everywhere. And King is quickly losing oxygen. He starts throwing punches towards the face of ogre, but now ogre is just ignoring them. They're not doing a thing. And with that, King slowly feels his body getting lighter. He feels his soul getting consumed. And with that, King is then no more. He is consumed by Ogre. King wakes up in nothing but darkness and silence. It's almost as if he's not standing on anything. There's no ground, there's no ceiling, there's no sky, there's nothing. Just pure darkness. And all he can feel are the reflections of his own emotions, his anger, his vengeance. And it's something that starts to terrify him. For how can something that awful and that intimidating be inside of his soul? King wanders the emptiness of this darkness that he is now in search of a way out. And after some time, he sees Jin Kazama, and he looks at Jin, and Jin looks at him. This is the ogre. King nods. Yes, this is the ogre. They are inside of the ogre. Their souls have been consumed. If anybody can beat him, it's my grandfather Heihachi. I don't think you understand. There's nobody that can beat this man. And with that, Jin and King trade looks and then begin to search for a way out of the eternal darkness that they have found themselves in. Now, while they're searching for a way out, I want to make a couple clarifications now that I am capable of doing so without spoiling anyone's main story arc. So, King was equal in strength when it came to Ogre, at least somewhat. Ogre is an otherworld entity. He is a godlike being, so of course King would have never been able to beat him down. However, the ogre that went up against Heihachi in my previous videos was the ogre after consuming King, meaning the ogre consumed all of King's strength, all of King's will, anger, hatred, vengeance, all of that. So, the ogre going up against Heihachi was much, much stronger than the ogre going up against King, because ogre consumed King before the match with Heihachi. Now, with that also being said, whenever ogre consumes souls, that heals his body. So all the damage he received from King was absent in the match against Heihachi. So, just in case you guys were thinking that I was trying to make King out to be stronger than Heihachi, do not worry, I am keeping everything in line with the continuity of the story. With that being said, let's go back to Jin and King. During their wanders, they find Kuma. Yes, the grizzly bear who was once a proud training partner of Heihachi has been consumed by the ogre. The three continue to wander, and they find Makujin, a tree who, spending his life in the forest, has managed to absorb enough intellect to become somewhat human. And as he fights, he absorbs those fighting styles and all their experiences and knowledge. And so the four of these guys continue to wander. And as they wander, they finally see a throne with this ugly, disgusting looking beast sitting upon it. This is what's known as true ogre, with massive horns on its head, an ugly spider-like face, a scorpion tail, and gigantic wings, and a moth-like body. Now, this is the soul of true ogre. While Heihachi is fighting the live true ogre in the real world, these four decide to commence battle against the soul of true ogre. As these five souls engage in battle, Heihachi is engaging in battle in the real world, and true ogre is having to divide his focus on half on Heihachi and the rest in the Soul World, in the Soul Realm, going up against these 5 fighters. And this fight commences in one of the coolest frickin' team-ups that Tekken has to offer. And so the time has finally come, the time that King has been waiting for, the vengeance he's been training for, has finally come to put an end to King the First's killer. And these 4 just team up, and they're amazing together. You have King, who is able to carry the team by holding True Ogre in grapples, creating openings on True Ogre for attacks. You have Jin Kazuma, who's able to use the Devil Genes and the Holy Sense to charge up these massive blows, while True Ogre is in a grapple by King, and there's no way for True Ogre to block or dodge these massive strikes. And then, whenever True Ogre manages to get out of a grapple from King, Makujin comes into play, because Makujin has a worldwide list of just all these different types of martial arts, and he's even absorbed King style, Akuma style, and Jin Kazuma style. And so he's able to throw attacks that True Ogre cannot predict or block, and get True Ogre back into a defensive stance, where King can then grapple him again, and Jin Kazuma is then able to deliver massive blows. Kuma, being the massive powerhouse of a bear that he is able to deflect True Ogre's more devastating attacks, like his flames, right? Whenever True Ogre blows out flames, Akuma is able to just pull on those horns or force the body away, because Makujin's a tree. He cannot get hit by flames, right? Whenever True Ogre tries to use his Scorpion Tail on King, Kuma is able to grab that tail and force it down so that King doesn't get stabbed in the back while grappling. And the just team abilities, these guys work as a great team, and neither one of them are expendable. They are all needed. Each one needs the other. And so True Ogre realizes that he's about to lose, and it is better to become weaker than try to take on all these fighters. So he swipes away Makujin's soul, and Makujin is no longer absorbed. And then he takes on the remaining 3. However, they're still working very, very well together, because now they don't need Makujin as much as they did, because True Ogre is weaker, and Heihachi is actually standing out and being able to take on True Ogre better, because he is weaker in the real world as well. And Heihachi in the real world manages to get on top of True Ogre and just starts prying away at the horns of True Ogre, trying to tear them out of his skull. And so True Ogre is having to put more energy and more focus on Heihachi, so he swipes away Akuma, getting rid of a huge amount of strength that he once had. Now King and Jin, it's just these 2 men and Heihachi in the real world, and they are just going at each other. And they go at True Ogre with massive force. King is no longer just creating openings. He's throwing spear lunges, spear kicks, chamber kicks, thrusting elbows, you name it. He is throwing every attack he can, while Jin 2 is throwing out huge, massive amounts of damage. And so King finally is released from that bondage, from that hold, and he wakes up where he was last absorbed, and he looks into the temple, and he sees that now True Ogre does not have the strength it takes to keep his body intact with Heihachi, and Heihachi tears the horn out of True Ogre, flips the horn upside down, and stabs it straight through the skull of True Ogre. And with that, the fight is done. Jin Kazuma is released. Heihachi picks up Kazuma and they go away. And King stands there. And as he looks into the sky, he knows that he finally did it. He was able to bring justice for the wrongs that was done to his father figure, to his mentor, and to the man who took care of all these kids, including him. And so he goes back to the real world and becomes one of the best pro wrestlers the world has ever seen, while training underneath Armored King. As time goes on, everything seems perfect. He's training and bonding with Armored King. He's becoming the world's greatest professional wrestler, professional wrestler champion, and he is taking care of all these orphans, and he is the head of the orphanage, taking care of all these kids, just like King the First once did, living in the footsteps of King the First. Unfortunately, that is where the happy ending ends, and King ends up entering a whole new life here in a moment. Armored King is enjoying a nice evening at a bar when Marduk, another professional wrestler, is giving him slack and just giving him a lot of crap and telling him that King is a piece of shit and that he is too a piece of shit, and luchadors have no place in the wrestling world. And this starts to anger Armored King, and Armored King ends up getting into a bar brawl with Marduk, and Marduk does not hold back, and Marduk pulls out all sorts of cheap, shitty, low blow attacks and grabs a whiskey bottle and bashes it over Armor King's head, and Armor King is somewhat intoxicated and is not capable of defending himself, and Marduk grabs the skull of Armored King and smashes it against a bar stool, snapping his neck, killing Armored King. Now, of course, King finds out about this, and Marduk is arrested and goes to prison for murder. And King has to again go through experiencing losing a father figure, his mentor, and the anger, the rage that he once had boils and resurfaces, and he is now again a man of vengeance. And Tekken 4 is on the way, and the 4th Iron Fist tournament is announced. Now he goes ahead and draws, and he is accepted. He also draws for Marduk, and Marduk too is accepted, and King pays and bribes the prison to release Marduk. And so Marduk is released and finds out that he has been invited to the 4th King of the Iron Fist tournament. And King prepares to go to this tournament and will take vengeance on Marduk for killing his father figure. And that is where I'm going to leave the video for today. I will be coming out with a part 2 of this, so if you're interested, absolutely keep your eye out for that. As well, if you made it this far, thank you very much for listening. And like always, please do consider hitting the like and subscribe button, and maybe even sharing. I'm a small channel, helps me out a lot. Don't get hit by a meteor. Take care of yourselves, and bye.